Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and video show which brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, and experience from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe so you won't miss a new episode. I'm your host, Frits Busselmaker, and today I'm delighted and pleased to have a conversation with a good old friend, Nils Fonstad. Nils, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Fritz. I'm delighted to be here.
Nils, allow me to introduce you to our audience. You are educated at the world's top universities, Cornell, MIT, Sloan. You got your PhD at MIT. You stayed as a research scientist, became an associate director at INSEAD in Paris of the E-Labs, came back to MIT, and you've actually been there ever since. Now, published a lot of papers, including for the Harvard Business Review, co-founded the European CIO of the Year Awards with CIOnet, and you're currently based in Madrid. Again,
Correct.
Welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And I would like the main topic of this session to be actually one of the papers you wrote, which got accepted in the Harvard Business Review, around digital innovation, because that's your background, that's what you've been doing for the last 20 odd years. What is digital innovation? Let's start with that question.
Great. Well, so the definition that we work with is actually a derivative of MIT's definition of innovation. So MIT, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, defines innovation as a process of taking an idea from concept to impact. And that's it. No inclusion of technology, because they're afraid that if you start with technology, you're going to start with a solution and not fall in love with the problem first. And it's a process that realizes impact. So at the end of the day, it's anchored in impact. For digital innovation, we do include digital technologies. So we define digital innovation as a process of taking an idea for using digital technologies from inception to impact. And again, we anchor all of this in the impact. You will notice that we don't talk about disruptiveness. That's a really popular aspect and an important aspect of digital innovation, of any innovation. How disruptive is it? And a lot of companies use Horizon 1 for kind of incremental innovation, Horizon 2 for slightly more radical, and Horizon 3 for really radical. We don't look at that because at the end of the day, the companies that we study, the organizations that we study, they have scarce resources. And so they need to make sure that the resources they do have are put into efforts that have impact, whether that impact is realized by an incremental innovation or a radical innovation. Honestly, they don't care. They want the impact. And so we look at the process of achieving that impact with digital.
Wow, that's really diving in the deep end from say the get-go deals. Thank you, by the way, for that definition of what digital innovation is. For whom is that a relevant question?
So it's relevant for at least two stakeholder groups, and then third, broadly, society. But let's start with the two more immediate stakeholder groups. There's the innovators, right, who are getting resources from, say, an organization. So if I'm going to lead a digital innovation initiative, the resources I get, the people, the budget, the technology, that's going to come from an organization, including external folks like vendors, right? What am I going to do with all of these resources that I get? Well, I need to first understand who the end user is, what their needs are, how can I help them? And then I need to understand why the organization has given me those resources. So what are the interests of the organization? And so the two stakeholder groups are the end user. What are their interests? Why would they even use whatever I'm working on, whatever solution I'm developing? And can I, with the resources I have, help those end users in such a way that also helps the organization that is giving me those resources? So that those two are the immediate. When many initiatives do that well, that's to the benefit of the initiatives per se, because they avoid wasting resources on ideas that seem promising, but say no user is going to actually use. It's what I call fondue sets. So, intuitively, they seem like great ideas, but at the end of the day, they have no impact. It's like when I got a fondue set when I got married, right? I thought I would use that thing every day because I love fondue, but I never have used that fondue set. It's just gathering dust on the top shelf of my kitchen. And this is a problem with too many initiatives, right? And so when we don't anchor our efforts in a real clear idea and evidence and everything about the end user and what need we're trying to help them with, then we're at risk of creating a fondue set. And that's not in the interest of the organization that's given me the resources as well. Society doesn't want that either, right? As a member of society, I want to be on an initiative that I can learn by doing, right? And if I learn by doing on an initiative that didn't help the end user and didn't have impact on the organization that gave me those resources, then we all end up losing. It's like a lose, lose, lose. So it's in no one's interest to be wasting resources. And so what we've been trying to do is really understand, when I refer to we, it's me and my research partners. When we look at digital innovation, we're trying to understand two things. First, what does it take to really realize impact? And second, how can we do so without wasting resources?
Got it. Now, the way you describe it, it's definitely you're describing research, but can part of that research, can be part of that work also be consultancy in the sense, do you get questions from individual organizations or industries? Hey, how would it work for us? And what's your, as a researcher, what's your answer then?
Yeah, so I don't do consultancy per se. What I do is offer workshops based on the research insights that my team and I have developed. Mm-hmm. What's the difference? Well, the difference is my goal and my interest, honestly, my interest. So this is not a criticism of consultancy. This is simply what motivates me, right, as an individual. I love doing research, but I love having that research impact teams in organizations by inspiring them with what others have done and then guiding them to do similar accomplishments, but wasting fewer resources and thus realizing much more impact. So the workshops are intended to give these teams that don't have much experience working with each other, because one of the key aspects of digital innovation is that it involves bridging traditional organizational silos, both inside an organization and outside the organization. These cross-functional teams, cross-disciplinary teams, cross-organizational teams, they need some common language and understanding of what it takes to thrive with digital. And I love, my part in that is providing them with those insights in a neutral way, right? I'm not trying to sell them additional services. I'm trying to teach and discuss and help them apply what I've learned from others, and hopefully they can put that to use. And usually what helps them most is to listen to what I've learned, discuss and try to apply what I've learned, and in the process, develop a common understanding, a stronger common understanding, a stronger common language. Even just start with digital innovation, right? That was a great question to ask me, because you ask a room of 10 executives, what's digital innovation? And we're going to get 20 replies, right? And so having a common understanding of what we're aiming for, what we're willing to invest in, and what we need to stop investing in turns out to be a critical foundation from which then they come up with their own approach for the organization, their own decisions, but hopefully now more empowered with the insights that I developed.
Great. Hey, Nils, it's obviously clear where you ended all those years with lots of knowledge on the digital innovation side. But I was just wondering, because I want to take a step back now, is how did you get it? Because the one thing I didn't share with the audience, when you were at Cornell, the first university you attended, you did mechanical engineering and film.
That's
So
right. That's right.
how do you transition from being an engineer looking at film into being a hardcore researcher in digital transition or innovation? Sorry.
I've been frankly privileged to be in different educational environments where I could choose to piece together from very different, disparate areas of expertise my own kind of foundation of insights. When I went to Cornell, honestly, I was into theater and the arts and engineering. So I looked for schools that were strong in both. Uh, I started with mechanical engineering, but it seemed to be only about mechanical engineering and less about applying it. And kind of, I was missing the arts part.
Yeah.
So and I had a lot of friends at Cornell that were architects. And so I was like, maybe that's what I want to become as an architect. And so that summer between my freshman and sophomore year, I had again the privilege to have the option back home. I'm from Boston. I'm originally from Boston. And Harvard University offered a summer program in the architecture school. And it was kind of more of a mid-career. So I was by far the youngest in that program. But I learned in 3 months that I did not want to become an architect because that was going from one intense area, mechanical engineering, to an even more focused and intense area, which was architecture. My God, my poor friends would not sleep at all. It was a 5-year program. I was like, oh my Lord, I definitely don't want that. And another friend was working in film studies and filmmaking. I was like, maybe I'll try that. And I could, right? So although at Cornell, it's there's 7 different colleges. So they each have their own requirements and everything. But I was lucky enough that the College of Engineering allowed me to pursue my Bachelor of Science, and the College of Arts and Science allowed me to pursue my my Bachelor of Arts in film. And I could do the both. It took me an extra semester, but I could do that. And so again, I was fortunate. I didn't have to pick something and stick with it. Otherwise, I'd get nowhere in my professional life. I then did documentary filmmaking for 3 years. I moved back to Boston. Boston's one of the big centers in the US for documentary filmmaking. And I was able to do that. I mean, my parents are both scientists, they're academics. They had zero connections in that world. And I was, again, lucky to find some amazing connections, these independent editors and producers and directors, these editors that back then, so we're in the mid 90s now, they had this cool new way of editing film where, get this, you would digitize this film and then edit it on this thing called the Avid, which was in Western Massachusetts. And this is like now obvious, right? People are like, what are you talking about? Right. It's like, well, what's a telephone? Right. And so this was like I was lucky enough to be in this transition from analog to digital in film editing. And you could see the sound. It was like unbelievable. Right. And so having and I got rejected from MIT. So my father, who's a professor at MIT, that didn't help, right? So as my undergrad, I got rejected from MIT. So I went to Cornell, made the best of it there. And then after the documentary filmmaking, I decided to pursue policy making because I could communicate now. I understood sciences. So I did policymaking with electrical vehicles, and I got into Harvard and MIT with this, right? And so I chose MIT in this amazing program called the Technology and Policy Program, which was designed specifically to bridge these departments that were basically academic silos. And so that's how I but the first semester I took this amazing course in multi-party negotiations, and I switched to that online negotiations. So all of this to say, my career, frankly, has been opportunistic, guided by my central passion, which is how do we bring all these different interests together and come up with a solution that is a win-win-win, right? Like that's the essence of what I'm really interested
Yeah.
in. And it's not about coming up with a solution first and then building it on time, within budget, within scope, because that doesn't work. All of these interests are constantly evolving. And so that sweet spot, that overlap of all of these different interests, it's itself a moving target. And guess what? That's the essence of design thinking as well, right? So slowly I kind of found this kind of relatively stable area of interest, which is around digital innovation at scale, right? Not just from an individual initiative point of view, but how do we as an organization, as a country, how do we manage many of these
Yeah.
without unnecessarily duplicating efforts, without creating a new generation of spaghetti, etc. So those are the interests that I kind of ended up coming to, but there was no way that I planned any of that.
And maybe that's also the lesson learned for you could say, the young people out there listening to you is maybe don't want to plan everything. You just go with the flow and see what's coming to you, see what sticks, and
And do it well,
that's it.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, once you pick something, do it well. So, for example, to support myself, I worked as a baker, right? And so that was in high school, but then also in college, and in between, as a documentary filmmaker, there were moments where I needed more cash, and I would go back to this bakery that was owned by women, and you work from 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning until 10 a.m. I loved it. It was one of the best bakeries. It still gets awarded one of the best bakeries in Boston, Quebrada Baking Company.
Nice.
And but so whatever you pick, really do the best possible. So it's not. I would just be careful about just try something here. Listen to yourself. Listen to what drives you. But if you've committed to something, do it well. Do it really well, as best as you can. Push yourself, and then decide whether that was something that you wanted to do or not.
Got it. Hey, are there any people you see as role models which you follow in your work?
I guess lots of them. One of them, I was very fortunate, actually, in my master's program to actually this course that I walked into late was a course on multi-party negotiations by Bob McCursey, who's still around. He's now emeritus and 90 plus years old. And he's always been this role model because he was one of the co-founders of negotiation theory. And it's fun. And he puts it in practice. Like he practices what he preaches in the most outstanding, admirable ways, helping a huge range of people. And he's insanely generous. I've always admired my role models tend to be extremely generous people, and so I've been very fortunate to have role models like Bob McCursey, but then others. The women that I worked with at the bakery, for example, they are also insanely generous, extremely dedicated. They take all aspects of baking to another level, right? The 3-star Michelin level. And it's not about the recognition. It's because they really respect the end user. They want everyone who takes their money and invests it in a croissant or a muffin or bread, that it's going to be the best investment that they made. And that makes them proud. And so I loved working at the bakery because we made really, really delicious food every morning, right?
You're making me
That to
curious
me is
now.
also another amazing role model. And so I've been very fortunate. Of course, my folks and my husband. So I've been really blessed that I have a lot of amazing role models.
Got it. Hey, and what you've picked up over the years from the bakery, from the film academy, can you take that on board when you discuss digital innovation? Are there some lessons learned which transfer to your current research area?
Absolutely. Again, start with the end user, so don't fall in love. This is classic design thinking combined with agile and all these other methodologies. But I really believe, and again, this is not new, but to see it into practice and to see it practice at scale, that's unbelievable to me, right? And so this notion of really anchoring what we're doing in being first and foremost clear about who do you want to help and how, right? And that requires constantly listening to them, not pretending you know the answer at all, recognizing second that how you can help them today is probably going to change in the future. I mean, assume that it's going to change.
Okay.
And so be ready for those changes, right? For my PhD, I ended up studying improvisation. I really found that to be the most helpful of all the frameworks, is to look at improvisation. And I started with improvisation in sports and in the arts. And so a lot of people, when they talk about improvisation, they think about,
First of all, stand-up comedy. That's the first thing which comes to mind.
Stand-up comedy, jazz is probably the second thing that comes to mind. These are all in the moment, spontaneous, right? Often we think of speed when we think of improvisation, or off the cuff, right?
Yeah.
When in fact, it's extremely disciplined, right? To do it well, you have to be extremely disciplined. To do it with a group, that's a whole nother level, right? And then turned out the source of improvisation that was most inspirational and useful for me was African American quilt making. If you look at African American quilt making, this long history for over 100 years, these are women, and was mostly women with very few resources, who would take the scraps of what they had available and put together these quilts that were quite structured. But when you look at them, if you know anything about patterns, you could see the pattern, but you could see how they played on that pattern, given the situation that they were working in and as it evolved. And what's distinct about quilt making from all the other examples of improvisation is you have a tangible thing that develops, right? So that you can put down the work of art that, and often it's done in groups, you can put it down and actually pick it up a day later or two. This is especially relevant for digital, because digital leaves legacy, right? We have digital things that we create, for better or for worse, that end up becoming interdependent. Just think of data. Data is a thing that is kind of a residue of what we've generated. And so consider it like a piece of cloth. And some data is useless. Some of it is actually quite useful given what we're trying to do, etc. Right? And this is why we talk about modularity in digital now, right? And where we look at infrastructure, and the key to really having a flexible, agile, resilient architecture and infrastructure is modularity. Guess what? Just like quilt making, right? So, believe it or not, my research, the foundation, has been most inspired by African American quilt making, of all things.
That's really amazing. I never ever would have guessed that is helpful and useful, talking about digital innovation. By the way, when you do your workshops, do you bring in this topic of quilt making and
I do. It depends, because actually these days I start with examples from the real world. So these days, like Repsol, because they enhanced cash flow from operations by 20% in 5 years through their first wave of the digital program. That gets executives' attention. That engages them much more strongly than, say, a story about African American quilt making, with all due respect to the quilt makers. And so, but eventually we do get there, because, because a lot of people get improvisation, right? They're familiar with it. They get that this is discipline. There's all these what do you call it, paradoxes to the process of innovation, right? This notion of top down versus bottom up. this notion that you need to be structured, but of course, too much structure is going to kill the innovation, and too little, it's just let 1,000 flowers blossom. And with digital, because it's the same quilt at the end of the day, you're going to end up with a legacy of mess, of spaghetti, right? And so how to find the right balance of all of this, that the improvisation metaphor makes sense. Now, the next, often once they understand it from an initiative point of view, the next question is, okay, pause now. Have you ever seen an organization improvise? Have you ever seen an orchestra improvise? Pretty much no is the answer. Why? Because it's really, really, really difficult, right? And so it requires a whole different set of minimal structures. So when you look at it at the team level, one of these concepts that's key to improvisation is the minimal structure, right? Again, too much, you're going to suffocate innovation. Too little, you're not going to get any synergies across, right? And so you need this minimal structure. What does that even look like in organizational improvisation? And that's what I've been focused on in the last 10 years. So it's useful, but it also has its limits, like everything we do, like every model.
Hey, it's really fascinating to think about digital innovation and link that to improvisation. Hey, one other question I had. How often do you get asked, hey, can you predict the future? What's going to be the next hype in digital? I mean, is that an obvious question for you to get?
Yeah, my answer is twofold, and both aspects are related. The future is about testing and learning. So the future isn't about can you guess the right answer, but for me, it's can you guess the right process for continuously developing and improving on solutions. So for me, it's about the answer is in the process. And but again, with digital, you're rarely doing that on your own, right? And so thinking beyond the initiative per se, and also considering shared resources. So you avoid unnecessary duplication of efforts. You avoid creating the next generation of spaghetti, especially within an organization. And then it just helps your effort, right? If you can reuse what others have done, which has been also classic in improvisation, if you can reuse, we're all for the better. We're all for the better, right? Third, we need to prioritize. We don't ever have enough resources to do all the things we'd love to do. So we have to prioritize our time, our money, our talent, all the resources we have. And so that prioritization is also a test and learn approach, right? Today, I'm going to say, okay, I think I'm going to have to focus more on efficiency and less on revenue generation. And then suddenly the situation may change where you're like, okay, now I have to focus a lot more on revenue generation, especially the new business models, and less on the efficiency or employee experience. The fact is we're going to have to do all a little bit of at once. It's a portfolio, right? Which doesn't mean one at the cost of all the other, one and nothing with the others, but it's about shifting the weights of what we're trying to achieve, then realigning our efforts to those new, what I call priorities, strategic priorities, and then reallocating our resources to those efforts most likely to have the biggest impact on what we're trying to achieve. But that's increasingly happening every quarter, every month. That's happening more frequently. But again, whether it's around the initiative per se, whether it's around the shared resources or the portfolio management, those are each led in larger organizations. Those are led by different leaders, but those leaders are each taking a test and learn approach. And so again, two things. I think it's about taking a test and learn approach. That's the future. But what test and learn approach you're going to take will depend on what you're leading, right? Are you trying to help an initiative? Are you held accountable for an initiative success? Well, then, you're going to be testing and learning what the right solution is for that specific end user. If you're leading shared resources and you're trying to listen to many initiatives, identify common challenges, and meet those common challenges with reusable resources. If you're responsible for the whole portfolio, you need to be really clear about the strategic priorities and how they shift, and then the realignment and reallocation of resources. Wow. So I also see that the future is going to depend on different kinds of leaders that are each responsible for making it safe to learn rather than to fail. I emphasize a lot the discipline of learning rather than, oh, well, we failed, but hey, it's acceptable. Let's move on. I think we can get a little more out of our resources by focusing instead on making it safe to learn. And that means whether we're leading an initiative, shared resources, or the portfolio process, that means making it safe to say, I actually don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but that's okay. I'm smart enough to say, you know what, let's try this for the next semester or next quarter. Let's try doing ABC, but we're going to do ABC in such a way that at the end, we're going to learn whether those are the right things to do or not and why. With those additional insights, hopefully there's less uncertainty and we can then come up with an even better hypotheses to then, continue the testing and learning process.
Yeah. And Nils, you sound like a man on a mission almost when you talk about digital innovation. Hey, a couple of quick questions because time is moving so fast. I got two more questions for you briefly. First of all, you're still at MIT. Last time I checked, MIT is on the East Coast in the States, but you're based in Madrid. How does that work?
Well, lucky enough, so we're part of a two-sided consortium. So that means we don't represent the interests of any single researcher, and we don't represent the interests of any single organization. So we have over 60 organizations that invest in us. Our research is available for free to anyone. This is the wonderful approach that MIT takes about its research insights, is we make all of that for free. The reason, again, that people support our research is actually the workshops that we do, as I mentioned earlier, to really further strengthen the common language and understanding of their leadership teams. And again, there's many different kinds of leaders in these organizations, but they're all working across organizational silos. They really need as a foundation this common understanding and language around how other organizations thrive with digital. And that's hopefully what we provide for them.
Okay, but how do you end up in Madrid?
That was because of my husband.
Okay, but does that mean you work remotely for MIT?
I focus on European organizations and I'm half Colombian, so I also focus on South American organizations, including Brazil. We're global. Our sponsors are global, so we need to reflect that in our research.
Nils, we might need a second interview because there's so much topics to cover here. But maybe one last question for now. Where do you see yourself ending? Is this your end? You could say station, doing this type of research, or are you thinking, how am I going to evolve?
So I love doing what I do, which is both research and then engaging with executives and learning from those engagements, etc. So I love this iteration. And so I envision the future focusing on more public sector organizations, including state organizations, international organizations. We don't have enough data for them, insights for them. And then SMEs. SMEs are the engine for most countries. But right now, for the last 10 years, I've admittedly focused mostly on larger organizations, public sector and private sector, mostly private though. And so I'm very, very curious how insights around portfolio management and shared resources, what does that look like for SMEs? Those are the kind of questions that interest me, but I'll tackle those after I finish a book that I'm working on. So after that, which hopefully will be in the next year, then I will really focus on SMEs and their interests and needs.
One final additional question. What's this book about?
On digital innovation. So we really want to inspire and guide top management teams, inspire them to be to pursue strategic ambitions with digital, but then to then redesign their approach to digital innovation, to really convert their approach to digital innovation so that digital innovation is a means for achieving their strategic ambition rather than an end per se.
And I can imagine that on the cover of that book, you're going to have a nice piece of bread in a quilt.
A nice croissant. Those are the best ones. Holy moly. Yes.
Hey, Nils, looking forward to your research, your book.
Thank you.
Now, thank you so much for being with us with The Brand Called You. Ladies and gentlemen, Nils Fonstad, MIT. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.